All right, good afternoon, everybody. Wendy Peliquin with Avinion. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the why and how of moving to the utility network. Really, today I don't intend to get very technical about the utility network. It's really just more of conversation starters for you and your organization as you start to evaluate the utility network and if it is right for you. So real quick, a little bit about Avinion. We are a professional services and consulting firm. We're an Esri partner. We do hold the network management specialty. And of course, we're also big users of FME and partner with Safe Software. A little bit about our client engagement philosophy is not really different from anyone else. We really want to understand what your problem is so that we can help and work with you to design a solution that's going to meet your business needs, and then of course help you implement it and move it into a sustainable model for you to keep on utilizing it. So, if you are new at a utility, or if you're, starting to work with your utility, or they really haven't been starting to use GIS, there's really a couple of buckets of what GIS can do for, the utility and the organization. There's lots of different use cases, but a lot of the big ones are, asset management, field data access and mobility. But one of the big things is it really doesn't matter if you're water, sewer, electric, gas. All utilities have these same kind of needs and how GIS can be applied to help them with the business. So really, what is the utility network? And it's a controller for the data set that you're going to be using to really understand where are your assets? What are they connected to? Why does that matter for you? What are all the devices that are involved? What valves happen to need to be turned at times? What if something breaks? What's going to happen upstream, downstream? If you're going to go and dig a hole, what are you going to find there? But really, that utility network is the data set that can be used to collect and manage all of that attribution for your utility. So really the first question that we get when we start talking about it is, how does it compare to the geometric network? And yes, they are related. You can kind of think of them as distant cousins in a way. But one thing, we do want to stress is just because you have the geometric network, it does not mean you are ready right today, tomorrow, to immediately go into the utility network. There are quite a few different things that you need to consider. It's not just, if I'm going to run a tool, I'm going to be there. There's a couple nuances that need to be considered, but really, the primary difference that, from a little bit of a technical standpoint right now is that geometric network was designed to operate in ArcMap, and we all know, utility network, you're going to need to utilize ArcGIS Pro. So, really moving into thinking about the utility network, if you're not into Pro yet, that is going to be a huge consideration. And the geometric network is really coincident features, with meters and valves are connected together through association in the utility network, and, the geometric network was a little bit more like point features connected here and there. One of the high-level benefits of the UN, these are quite a few of those conversation starters on why you might want to consider moving to the utility network. The biggest thing is tracing. It can be extremely powerful, and it's not just to understand what is upstream or downstream. It really unlocks a lot of analytical capabilities that, a lot of times people who are within the utility that may be above you in the chain of command or in other parts of the organization may need to know, and they don't even know that's a capability and something that you can do in GIS to help them model those systems. Another, big thing, we're seeing a lot of talk around the utility network is that vertical asset management. It's far better than what was previously available. In those older data models and solutions, and really, looking at BIM and 3D and the digital twin, it's becoming a lot more appealing, and that demand is really increasing, and the UN can greatly help you as you start to look at that and model your data in those manners. And another piece is the data quality control is really one to highlight. The data model is incredibly powerful. It's high fidelity. It's going to allow you to capture a lot more information that was not previously possible. But, at the end of the day, the utility network, it's improving, it's enhanced, and it's higher quality than what's been available before. And, one of the ways that, you're going to hear about it talked about is network as a service. It's really taking your data, allowing you to put it out there and access it as web services. I mean, it really means anywhere that you can securely connect to it, you can access it, whether that's out in the field or if you're sitting in a conference room, in a meeting. And that really unlocks a lot of capabilities that, weren't possible to be able to utilize that data out in the field, being able to do tracing while you're out there, complex queries. And another benefit is you have people who are not GIS people. You can really set this up for them in the organization to be able to find answers to some of the data and kind of unburden yourself and your other GIS team members. And a little bit more about the data model is, as I mentioned a couple of slides ago, talking about like 3D and the digital twin. With a lot of utilities, when they start talking about that digital twin, the utility network's really one of the easiest ways to start capturing that data and help support that. One thing, if this may be your first time hearing about the utility network, but I bet a lot of you have been hearing about it for the last 7 or 8 years. And unfortunately, it didn't gain a lot of traction right away. It was very complicated. That was one of the things that, related to it. Some of the messaging was a little bit hard to understand. The data model was very complex. It was kind of built for here's, anything and everything of everybody could ever want to use, kind of built for everyone. And it made it a lot harder for some of the smaller and the mid-sized communities to really, relate to it and understand that, because a lot of it was a lot more than what they needed. But, last year, Esri has done a fantastic job of simplifying that. They released the Essentials model, which is really a light version of the utility network to help get you that base functionality that you need as a potentially smaller organization with a lot less effort. And one thing to remember about that is there's different data models for each different utility. So that's also helping to follow those best practices rules of you shouldn't have one database that has absolutely everything in it. It's going to allow you to separate those out with those data models, which also we know can be great if there's an issue or problem that you need to recover something. You're not having to recover everything, just that small subset. And we're also seeing a lot of third-party solutions coming in and offering versions as well and how they can integrate with it. And talking a little bit further about some of the benefits, the way the UN allows you to visualize and represent the data is pretty neat. It's streamlining a lot of different things that, before had workarounds or just really long workflows to get to see the data. And now it's extremely easy, and a lot of it's quote unquote out of the box of being in the utility network. And, that visualization is really one of the places that it shines. And, there's a lot of, when it comes to assets and utilities, these logical diagrams that are easy to understand and easy to show now. Before, you could derive them, you could do some custom, but now it's really, you can be in a map session and it's one click away to be able to see it. And then of course, some of the examples of advanced visualization, being able to see the relationship between different and smaller assets in the infrastructure. It's a lot more logical in how you see them on the map, and where you're not putting things next to each other and imagining they are connected. You can use different symbology to portray those relationships and turn those on and off, so you no longer have to essentially degrade your data in order to have a visualization and having all the stuff in there that's not real or it's not really there just because you didn't have a better way to represent it and be able to show it to everyone. And a lot of that is really coming into containments and being able to show it all in a small piece. And kind of going back to that with the also looking at what's done with the associations, and this is where you can represent those assets and devices that aren't exactly features in your data set. The attributes, the information is extremely important, but it doesn't need to show every single piece in the map, but you need to know it's there and it's part of it. You can really capture those and, present them when and where you need to and be able to share that out. And of course, brings us to a lot of you that maybe the ones managing that data will be excited about is, there are a lot of advanced editing capabilities that Utility Network brings. One of the big things is the network rules, and they're incredibly important and allow you to enforce criteria in the data. So essentially, it's going to prevent you or anybody else who is working on the data from creating bad data. So as you implement the network, you're making these decisions that do not allow you to introduce errors into your data as you move forward. Things like if you have a 10-inch pipe, you can't have an 8-inch fitting connected to it. It's going to automatically catch those so that you're not having to go back later and find all these things during QA/QC or when another problem arises and understand that it's wrong. One of the other big pieces are the attribute rules that can be used to auto-populate a lot of data. So that's going to prevent invalid edits. And the great thing about it is these attribute rules and editor tracking is going to come as part of the package. So you don't have to dream this stuff up of, it's there for you to work with and get started with in the beginning, so you're not having to start everything from scratch. And then of course, the big thing, talking a little bit about tracing and analysis, valve isolation is the most common example that you're going to see in demos and marketing materials as you start talking about the utility network. But definitely, don't want to limit your mind to that. It's a lot more powerful opportunities for your team and how you can utilize the data. But really, it's going to allow you to model those scenarios for your organization and allow them to make better business decisions a whole lot faster. So that's a little bit about what the utility network is, how it can be used, to enhance your data in your organization. But the big piece is, yeah, I've heard about it, but how do I get there? How do I move forward to it? What's the logical way to get into the utility network? And the big piece that you have to start with if you're going to make that migration is know that there are a number of software and hardware considerations that are going to have to be met. The UN is a very powerful solution, and it's going to be implemented on the ArcGIS enterprise level. It's going to leverage branch versioning and feature services. So you need to make sure that, you have the appropriate licensing from Esri, you have enterprise implemented, and also taking a look at, you might need to beef up your hardware or, even your network, because there is going to be a larger demand on your resources. But of course, the other thing that I mentioned at the very beginning, you are going to have to move off of ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro, which you all have to do it anyways. So it's just one of the big things that's going to come as a change. And so, once you take a look at your infrastructure, the next thing you're really, a lot of people want to jump into is the data assessment. And this is going to be incredibly important. But we want you to know that when you get into that, know that your data is going to need work. And that's not always a reflection that you have bad data. Some of you may have bad data that you don't have confidence in, but some of you have phenomenal data and actually a lot of information. It's just, it's a different data model. You may not have had all of the assets that you are going to need, so you are going to have to make changes to your data. So definitely don't be taken aback from, that. It's not always, a negative thing. It's a great opportunity to also evaluate what attributes you can collect, because now you have a great place to do it and how it's all connected, so it's easy to put them into the data model. There are going to be ones that may be required for the UN that you didn't previously had, but it's really, a great way to look at that. So really going through the data assessment exercises, one of the big things that at Vinion that we do is we really look at the data in 3 stages when it comes to cleanup. What do you need to start cleaning up in your data now before you start the migration? What can actually be automated through the migration to clean up? And then, of course, what do we recommend you waiting until after you've made that migration to start cleaning, because you have access to so many more tools and better tools that is going to actually streamline a lot of that editing once you're in the utility network. So that's really one of the things to think about, because we do want to automate as much as possible, and there's a lot of ways with adding in some of those attributes or some of that data that we can easily do it and you're not going to have to touch it and think about it. But there are going to be sometimes things that you're going to have to do before we even start talking about moving it through the the data cleaning process for the migration. And then, of course, there's a lot of configuration considerations around the data modeling. We're doing a lot of workshopping around this, and we find that this is really where you're going to spend most of your time in planning for the utility network. Because ultimately, the GIS data is going to be integrated with other business systems, or there's a need to integrate it with other business systems. Understanding, the use cases. We have worked with some smaller organizations that kind of start to do it, and then that's that. You know how personalities and politics get when you start working with the groups outside of your little group, and if you're, don't fully understand exactly what the data is, how it can be used, or, be able to communicate those aspects of the utility network for them. That's really, where that consultative approach can come in handy to, help you understanding it comfortable, and of course those in the organization as well. So, once you get to that migration step, this is a space where Esri has put a lot of energy, and we're seeing new releases, we're seeing new tools available for loading the data. I will talk in a minute about a new data loading tool that officially got released about a week ago. But at Vinion, one of the big tools that we use is FME and creating workbenches that really streamline that process, and that's where some of the automation in some of these attributes comes in handy, that we're able to add in those additional benefits. But, one thing to stress is you're not going to go through one iteration. You're going to go through several with the data. Each time you're going to learn, and you're going to make a little bit of changes to what you need. So typically, small, mid-sized organizations, or if you don't have a lot of integrations, we typically average about 2 to 3. If you are a larger organization and you have a ton of integrations, likely you might need to plan for a few more. So, really, it's not just that data model, though. There's other things that Esri's packaging up with the UN, such as feature templates, symbology, attribute rules. And all these things are part of that package, and it really helps improve the experience of migrating to the UN. And like I said before, you're not having to start from scratch. You're not having to figure out what to do. This is a really great starting point to be able to, okay, here's some attribute rules, here's some templates that we can start taking advantage of. And those are really things that, as you get into taking and utilizing the Esri training, that they're going to be centered around a lot of those valuable tools that's going to come with the package to really help your organization move forward quickly. And then, of course, as we know with any type of project, training and change management is going to be your biggest variable on your organization. It is a significant transformation for the way that you manage and use the data. And that can really mean, depending on the uniqueness, there's going to be training on different tools. So understand who is going to need training, how much they're going to need, how long that is going to take. You're going to have different training for those editing in the office, those in the field, those that may be just needing dashboards. So really prepare for that from the beginning. But also, as the GIS person, are you familiar with branch versioning? Have you implemented that yet? Do you know how that works? But of course, at the end of the day, success is really measured on adoption. So is the rest of the team happy? Are they prepared for this change? And, what does adoption look like for your organization is how you're going to measure that success. And then, of course, kind of looking back at the iterative state of mind, something you might want to consider is a soft go live as we talk about the different iterations. Really migrate the data, test it, put it out there, let them start utilizing it, get feedback, then make your changes and adjustments before you make that next big step. And then, of course, once you do the go live, think about what's going to happen afterwards. Are you prepared for when they come back with that feedback? It is going to be time consuming and demanding. So if you're not able to support that, make sure you have a plan and understand how you can get help to support and maintain the utility network going forward. And then, of course, Esri has new releases. They just released the utility network migration tool set. It does come with, allows you to migrate your data without having to change your schema, which is huge. But one of the things is it's not suited for all organizations. If you have a complex network, existing integrations or planned integrations, it may not be the best route for you. So definitely, but if you are a smaller organization and looking at a phased approach, this could be a good start. And that's one of the things as we start talking to organizations, we look at, is this the right approach for you? Is this Essential model the full one for you to take a look at? And then of course, the utility network might not be for everybody, so just want to point out that you can still get to Pro. You can set up topology rules and attribute rules to make sure that you're keeping integrity in your data. Because if you are having to budget, if you don't quite have the infrastructure or license yet to plan to move to the utility network, this is a nice way to get you into Pro before you can make those steps. So, really at the end of the day, just recommend finding somebody that you can talk to and start understanding if this is the right step for your organization, for where you want to go, and start planning early for how you're going to get there. For small, medium organizations, it can take as little as 6 months, but for some larger, more complex, it can be anywhere from 12 to 24 months. It really just depends on that. But definitely start thinking about it and start planning ahead. So I think we just have a couple of minutes. Anybody have any questions? Nope. Well, if you do think of any questions later, we do have a booth in the exhibit hall. We'll be here all week. And if anybody is thinking of architecture infrastructure and planning for some Esri upgrades, on Friday morning, Kent Rothrock, who I work with, will be presenting on things you need to consider for those upgrades and migrations. So he'll have quite a good bit of information for you for those as well. All right, well, thank you.